A young woman, Sarah, comes to her parents for their wedding anniversary, but no one welcomes her into the house. And in the bedroom, she notices her mother monotonously beating her already dead husband with a knife, and, seeing her daughter, promises that now everything will be fine with them, after which she cuts her own throat. Sarah regains consciousness in the company of her husband Nick, and with a complete lack of memories not only of what happened, but of her married life in general. And the man sadly reports that he found his wife in the bathtub, bleeding, and barely had time to save him. And in the evening, when the girl is overcome by anxiety, Nick assures that now everything will be fine with them. Something happens to Sarah at night, and in the next bedroom, she meets her dead mother and father. And when it turns out to be a nightmare, Nick gives her the medicine prescribed by the doctor, after which Sarah remembers how she herself crawled out somewhere from behind a pool of blood. In the morning, a young lady looks out the window as her husband quarrels with some woman over something. When she picks up a ringing phone and answers in a female voice that she is very sorry, Nick appears and rudely forbids the woman on the other end of the line from calling here. It also turns out that Sarah only remembers certain things, her sister, her parents. Therefore, it comes as a shock to her when her husband tells her that her parents died a year ago and her sister took all the inheritance except this house. After taking a nap, Sarah again hears her husband's conversation with a stranger, and then Nick himself explains to his wife that this is Rose, the maid he hired to look after her. While Sarah, who has not found a toilet, is taking a shower, someone passes by, but, as we know, there's no one in the house except Nick and Rose. Sarah also does not have time to open the portal to the third floor. Rose literally appears out of nowhere and slams it shut, declaring that the owner has no right to go there because there's an exit to the roof. When Sarah asks about the grandfather clock she keeps hearing, Rose assures her that there is no clock in the house. Sarah approaches Nick, who is completely absorbed in working on some book. When asked about the photographs, he admits that he removed them, as well as the bathtub in which he found Sarah, so that his wife would not have bad memories. At night, the young lady wakes up and sees herself first in the bathroom, then in the mirror, then opens her eyes during some kind of attack, surrounded by alarmed people, then falls into oblivion again, and finally comes to her senses. Through the window, she watches as Nick chases people out of the house and approaches his wife, stating that her sister Julie came with Dr. Simps, but they did not come here, since he immediately kicked them out. In the evening, Nick plays the piano for her, feigning tenderness and care, and when asked what she was like before, he says that she was wonderful and extremely loved. The young woman suggests they start over, to which Nick replies that they have already been given a second chance, and then hugs his wife into the night. However, the girl still dreams of crawling out of the bathtub, bleeding, and then having a recent attack, surrounded by her sister and doctor. In the morning, Nick invites his wife to host a dinner party for their friends, and when the young woman meets Rose in the garden and intends to help her, the woman suddenly rudely retorts to the hostess. Sarah asks her husband about the reasons for the housekeeper's behavior, to which he excitedly invites his wife to take out her anger and answer the old witch next time. Suddenly Nick becomes rude, and the ridiculously overworked lady slaps him, which suddenly satisfies him because now his wife is reacting properly. At night, while Nick is working, Sarah wakes up and goes down to the basement, losing the bandages on her wrist. There she's met by Nick, who supposedly went downstairs in search of his wife, after which the couple make love under the gaze of Rose from the darkness. Sarah wakes up in her bed and, hearing a knock on the door, meets a man at the back door who introduces himself as Tom, Julie's friend. Sarah calls for her husband as Tom gives her the key, saying she can find her way home. However, when Nick approaches, there is no one outside. Nick cries and says how worried he is about his wife, making the girl feel guilty, and then gives her a red evening dress. Sarah has another nightmare that ends with her trying to attack her sister, and upon waking up, the lady goes to the barn, where they find family photographs and an old book from which the same key falls out as the one that Tom recently handed her. The man appears again and begins to strangle the girl, periodically changing his face to Nick's. All this also turns into a nightmare. However, when Sarah looks over her husband's shoulder as he hugs her, she sees the same key on the floor. Sarah asks Rose to clean the living room at least once for dinner, to which the woman replies that the hostess's opinion is pleasant, but Nick likes the way she cleans. Unpleasant words fall from the woman's lips, and Sarah no longer understands what the housekeeper actually said and what she imagined. She simply brushes her off. Left alone, Sarah pulls grass from the ground, which turns out to be someone's intestines. Then a black substance comes out of her mouth. Later, Nick tells his wife to cancel dinner and notes that he is proud of the way she treated Rose and brings another pill in the evening, prescribed by the doctor, so that Sarah will not worry. However, she still notices her frightened sister in the mirror. A young woman comes down to the guests, whom she does not remember and whose jokes make her uncomfortable. The girl is also shocked by the appearance of the elegant Rose, who greets guests as her friends. To which Nick whispers to his wife that the housekeeper didn't really hurt her and someone should cook. The man pulls out a pig and sits at the head of the table and talks about cannibalism. The guests are toasting, and at this time a young woman notices Tom and tries to ask her husband about it, but Tom skillfully turns everything into a joke. Tom continues to whisper to the girl not to listen to anyone, reminds her of the key, and advises her to look for the answer. Excited, Sarah asks for a drink, which Rose does, adding some kind of pill to the glass as Nick looks on approvingly. Soon Sarah feels the hand of the man sitting next to her on her knee and angrily stabs her with a fork. Passers-by simply lead the man out of the living room, and Nick engages his wife in a dance during which he initiates kissing. They are joined by other guests who suddenly decide to taste the hostess's blood, after which the young lady finally loses control and, having lost consciousness, rediscovers her nightmare. Completing this time was a mother in a wedding dress and a man with a pig's head. Sitting in a bloody bathtub, Sarah looks at the motionless guests, and the pig-headed man declares that the young woman has tasted the fruit, and now they can begin the transformation. The man reports that while sitting in the bathroom with a razor, she called out to him, then took off her mask, revealing a demon posing as her non-existent husband, Nick. The devil tells the man not to be afraid, because now he will take her home and tell her everything. And in response to the objection that she is at home, she just shakes her head. Sarah runs upstairs, and Nick, who followed her, again acts like her husband and not a demon, saying that she stabbed Bobby in the neck with a fork. A cat with a cross appears out of nowhere and tries to exorcise the demon. Taking this opportunity, Sarah grabs the key and runs to the forbidden door on the third floor, slamming it right in front of Nick, who arrives just in time. A young woman comes into the light, surrounded by demonic guests who try to grab her, then runs into the library and grabs a book called Rose. In it she finds an old photograph of a housekeeper and a drawing of Eve who tasted the forbidden fruit. The entire text of this bestseller also consists of one word, apple, interpreted as forbidden fruit. Sarah's book is the same. It turns out that during all this time, Nick wrote only one word, apple. The girl hears Tom begging her to come to the window, to the light, and Nick talks her out of death and advises her not to listen to the man, because of him, she cut her wrists, and he will no longer be able to save her. Tom, standing below, continues to persuade the girl not to succumb to the persuasion of her false husband, then begins to pray. Nick grabs Sarah's hand, and she suddenly remembers that on the night her parents died, it was Nick in the pig mask who forced her mother to kill her father and then cut her own throat. At this moment, Tom splashes holy water in Nick's face, which leaves burns on the demon's skin. And the young lady, finally trusting the bearded man, falls out of the window and appears in a tied bed just during the exorcism that has been happening over her for several days with the participation of the priest Tom, Dr. Sims, and her sister Julie, who, in order to return Rose, even asks the demon to pass into her. When it's all over, the doctor examines her and leaves her with her sister and Tom, admitting that for the first time he has found a possessed woman who actually remembers what happened to her. The man goes on to explain that after the demon left her soul, she was left with a void, a darkness that needed to be filled with light, because until that happened, she was vulnerable. As Tom leaves, Sarah finally discovers the grandfather clock she kept hearing upon arriving in the other world. Julie invites her sister to tea, gives her a pill prescribed by the doctor, and reports that she found her sister in the bathroom covered in blood, after which the young lady promises to always help Rose, and everything will be fine with them. Moreover, he does this absolutely with the intonation of the demon Nick, which says only one thing. Julie's cry during an exorcism session with a request for a demon to move into her was heard by him, and the request was granted.